Okay, so together with Meredith students from ICROF, I'm responsible of work package 6, which is all about impact. So basically, impact is the long-term effect of an intervention you're going to try to implement towards improved antimicrobial use, which I'm going to abbreviate as AMU a lot in my speech. And so what we try to do in that work package is to improve the construction of intervention by designing them in a strategic and participatory manner, and by laying out the mechanism for which impact will be generated. So that's what we've been doing for work package 6.
And then the second question is, can you tell us about the results you have found?
Okay, so one of our first results was to do a literature review of what has been done about impact assessment on AMU intervention in livestock. And well, our first finding was that there's actually not a lot out there. There's about 30 studies. And what the conclusion we drew from doing this literature analysis was that there's a lot of interference of the context, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution to have a successful intervention on AMU. So there's different types of strategic you can have. In some countries, they do information campaign or they try to produce guidelines to improve the way animals are maintained. And in other times, they have a support program to help herd and health management, or they can have norms and laws that are passed. So there's really a lot of different solutions. But one of the things we noticed is that top-down approaches tended to be less successful than intervention where things were designed in a participatory manner, meaning that the needs of the stakeholders were taken into account, that you really try to address the realities of what it is to work with animals in the field. And so what our first result was we really wanted to have that strategic approach that was relying on participatory process, and that very much tailored to the context of the country. Then our second result was to try to have people work in each country on the desired impact that they wanted to do. And well, very classically, because of the scope of the roadmap project, they wanted to have improved or decreased AMU, to have decreased antimicrobial resistance. But not only. One of the things that people really wanted to also have was a maintained or improved animal health and welfare. So people were very much aware that okay, we need to decrease the amount of antibiotic we use, but that must not be to the detriment of the way animals are living. So they must not suffer, they must not die. So you don't want to decrease AMU by making animals sick and making them die, which means that you also want to maintain your economic performance in your farm, and also for veterinarians that you don't want to have a business model that means that you're going to lose a lot of money. So there was those animal health, welfare, and economics aspects that were also important. Another result was that people were quite intent on having an improved communication on AMU towards consumers. There's a lot of confusion out there for consumers when they go to the supermarket and they see a ham that's AM-free. A lot of them think, oh, well, if this ham is AM-free, does that mean that this one contains antibiotics? Well, obviously it's not the case, but it's not clear for people. So there's really a need to have like a better understanding of consumers of what producing without antibiotics means. And other thing that people wanted was to have an improved collaboration among stakeholders. So among farmers, but also between veterinarians and farmers. And finally, because in Roadmap, we also work with developing countries. For countries in the South, what they wanted to work towards was also have an improved quantification of AMU, because there's not a lot of data, and they wanted to have better implementation of the national plans that exist but are poorly applied so far. And so we had people work on that in different countries, and some of the things we got out were new strategy to try to reduce AMU. And like we said, everything was adapted towards the context and according to the stakeholders that were involved in the process. For example, in Italy, they wanted to design some guidelines on the use of antibiotics in pig farms. In Belgium, they were more trying to work towards better establishing the advisory role of veterinarians in the pig sector. And in France, they wanted to design indicators that integrate animal health, well-being, use of antibiotics, and level of antimicrobial resistance. So different strategy. And so those impact pathways, so this strategy based on impact were some of the main results we have. And our final result is to try to do a transversal analysis of all those different impact pathways in the countries. So looking at their plausibility, acceptability, the sustainability in the long run, and trying to come up with a generic recommendation on transition pathway towards improved AMU. Well, the main learning is that so far in a lot of interventions that are being designed towards improving AMU, people do not think enough about impact, so long-term effects. They are very much focused on reducing AMU, but they really need to take into account potential negative impact, like we say, on the economic performance of farms, or on the income for veterinarians, or on health and well-being of animals. So people really need to be much more proactive in thinking about impact when they design the intervention. And ideally, this has to be done in a participatory manner. So really involving all the stakeholders, from the farms to the authorities, sanitary authorities of the countries. And you need to really tailor it to your context in your country at a specific period in time. So for example, right now with the avian flu crisis or the African swine fever crisis, obviously like some priorities might shift. So you really need to design interventions that are adapted to your country and the context that your country is currently in.